we really do become the result of our morphology. So having a strong presence for yourself in those moments can actually really make a big difference. The breath work is like exactly how to tune into all of those systems in one way. So that's kind of like the whole essence of my theory with tools is like even ones we're using for fitness, they should also resemble our anatomy, and a dumbbell does not. When you're moving with your joints in the way that they're designed, you're gonna have positive hormone responses. But if you move in the way they're not designed to, meaning too much lag force, too much stretching, pulling the joints apart, what happens? Cortisol, right? And then you have these cascading effects of painkillers.
Welcome to the Gamma Seeker broadcast. I'm excited to share this conversation with Steve Terry because as an athlete, he relates to the body a lot like I do. And he's one of the first people I've met that really talks about movements of the body being measured in vector formation. And he talks about the prime tools that we can use to help retrain the body. This is a conversation from athlete to athlete about how we've been building proprioception within ourselves and also with our clients. He unboxes a couple tools that he's been playing with behind the scenes, and I am delighted and honored to call Steve a friend. When we both run into complications or new ideas, we call each other often to unpack things. This is a conversation between two wizards who are playing with unseen things in science, trying to formulate our own new ideas of where gym and gym training and fitness training can go over the next century. I asked him some really off-the-cuff questions, and I think you'll really enjoy where this conversation went. Hello, Gamma Seekers. I have Steve Terry with us from The Body Lever. You may have seen me demonstrating the use of his tools quite a bit, and I am fascinated by his own approach to athleticism and recovery. So I asked him to be on here today, and his website is called thebodylever.com. If you haven't checked it out, he makes artisanal tools that are just wonderful for reconstructing the fascia of the body. So, Steve, will you please just let me know, in your opinion and in your words, right, what is the best way to recover?
I would put it down to two words: building sensation. I start and end pretty much everything I do with that these days. I have a long history in yoga practice and such, and I think those poses are kind of designed around building particular sensations, but then they can get lost and stratified in the details. For me, if I have an injury like the leg break as a kid, like I didn't really understand anything at that time, I really just try to slow down and, feel inward like anybody would, but just paying attention to those sensations, like how can I expand? When I discovered the body lever, it was like, what else is possible? If I can get sensation into these small spaces with the tool, maybe that'll spiral out and help the whole process kind of unravel itself, because we're self-healers. We don't need necessarily a whole lot from the outside. We really have to focus inward to do that sort of.
So when you're using the tool, I know that you discovered this just like I did through pain. Can you talk to me a little bit about like your worst injury and then how you recovered or learned from that recovery?
There's really two. The one I mentioned, the leg break, was kind of the impetus for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. It's been a long process of like, how did I get here? Because we're all kind of this like storm. I like to think of our nervous system as a storm, and lo and behold, there's rain that just came in today. And we're kind of the result of all of these patterns we built up over time. So when we're trying to deconstruct an injury, like how it happened or what's going on, we also have to think about that storm, the things that have happened in the past. That leg break led to instability in the left side of my body, and then I ended up with some knee problems and hip problem and shoulder pain on the opposite side. So, this building the sensations of like, oh, this is going on over here. I have this problem. Well, is there some way that this is interconnected is something to investigate as well. So not relying necessarily so much on outside forces, but on those intuitive feelings first. And then, in my case, discovering the tool, I used it for many years in my yoga practice and then got injured again. It was actually in a very similar way where I was using external leverage and I was twisted or not warmed up while I was teaching a class. And with that sensation that I taught through the pain, like discovering through pain, like you said, that was totally different. because I had all of this knowledge and I thought everything was kosher, was going the way I wanted it to. And I think that these injuries are opportunities to surpass our own limitations, because we get the chance to kind of broaden our thinking. Like, oh, I was doing everything inside of this box, no matter how expansive that box is, but then something happened that was an outlier event. I fell on something, or in my case, I was doing kind of this knee touch, trying to teach a handstand technique, and I felt a hot pop in my hip / low back. So that was my worst injury. Like you said, the recovery for that was way more intense, and I was basically in bed for 3 weeks, couldn't turn over without excruciating pain. So kind of going back to where I was before, trying to build sensation, I started in a further away place. I started in the distal place in my body, because all of the pain was very proximal in the center of the body. So I started with my hands and my feet, and I would just hang from rings and try to kind of undulate the spine and get a little bit of sensation in there. I had to get up out of bed and get over to kind of a training space in my house at the time to do so, which is a challenge in itself, when you're injured. But
you're just putting your pants on when you're injured is like a whole thing. Taking a shower, carrying something while moving,
You think, we think as humans that we're so capable, and we are, but, you have a little rib flare go out and it's like, oh, it's connected to everything, and then everything is terrible for a while. So that injury took me pretty much all of last year to recover from, and I'm still not, I would say, 100%. It forced me out of the straight lines that I was perceiving and partaking in the yoga practice, even more into kind of the spiral reality of training and fitness that I'm trying to embody now. And what that looks like is way, 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 way less volume. I was going up to up to 50 yoga classes a month at times, but I was traveling in my Sprinter van. I would be in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and just dart around any place, one class in the morning, one class in the evening, and then go visit friends. And, oh, yeah, I'll take a third one with them. Sure. And it's just too much. And I was talking about, operating within this like sub-maximal limit, like really wearing yourself down to where you're like, oh, I'm performing, but actually you're only going to class with like 30% of your capacity. And then you end up injured. So I really had to dial back from maybe the aggressive practice and look more at like, how do I keep everything dialed together? And as an exploration in that, I've been exploring symbolism from the past and the present, and trying to create new informational tools so that we can better understand these spiral systems in our bodies, instead of looking at ourselves as like these rigid, straight up and down, like square boxes and straight lines and all the building kind of related physics we apply to ourselves.
You're kind of annoyed, I think, like I am, with the standard bicep curl.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a real workout when we're isolating muscle groups. There's much more omnidirectional, functional ways to train the body, and to train the body to sustain impact and falls. So I really appreciate what you were saying about mapping out the tension. And I think that we have a culture in America that is very predisposed to hate pain, and as soon as they feel pain, to have the immediate desire to quell it. And I know that you and I have a different relationship to tension in the body. And when I hurt myself a lot, I go right into a super deep breathing pattern, and I go outside on the earth, because I feel like from out there, I have what I need to just sit with my body as it reconstructs and flushes and swells. So I was curious, let's just say you do something and you're not bleeding, right? You just sustain like an injury within the soft tissue. What is your immediate protocol of just kind of letting the pain wash over you?
Definitely touching the site, trying to get, our hands can tell. If you had two stacks of paper and one had 100 and one had 99 and you weren't told which one, your fingers could tell which one, because we're that sensitive to our environment. So when you actually palpate the tissues, you get a nervous system feedback that helps your brain to map what's going on. So if there's an injury and you're exploring the space, for example, my knee is sensitive sometimes, and I use one of my little handy levers and I poke in there into the tissues to just try to realign things. And that's really what I'm trying to do first, is feel like, what the what the hell just happened? Let me catch up to the moment first. Breath is obviously, something that will come with or without your control over it. Having that extra control is going to allow you to layer the experience and like actually get to a better place with it much faster, I think. So much of our breath is going to like compress our body in. And if you're just naturally compressed like this and you're injured, like you're just going to take that mind state, we really do become the result of our morphology. So having a strong presence for yourself in those moments can actually really make a big difference. The breath work is like exactly how to tune into all of those systems in one way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I had a feeling we were similar. I like to hydrate. It's like I have my own little protocol, and thankfully I haven't had many breaks. I have been bitten by poisonous insects more than anybody I know, which is weird.
That sucks.
Yeah, and it requires...
But you must be in all the fun places to get all of that attention from insects.
Yeah, the garden.
Yeah,
they're out there and I'm out there with them, and sometimes they find me and I feel like it's the Pokemon, like you got to catch them all. I feel like I got a lot of weird insect poison.
Building that toxin resistance slowly, right?
Yeah. I have a question about, like, if you and I were both 15 years old, right? We just get a kind of a restart. We're feeling athletic, we're starting to train. What would be your biggest advice?
Don't think in straight lines. I guess it's very vague, but I mean, it's basically everything I'm doing now. And maybe if I like planted that seed in that 15-year-old me, it'd be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do everything like everybody else. I should do things a little. And I did that naturally. I was always like pulling on ropes and dragging weights across the gym room floor. And people are like, get that out of here. You can't do that stuff in this gym. What? This is training. This is functional stuff. They're like, what are you talking about? This is like 15, 20 years ago, And then everybody starts using those undulation ropes. I'm like, see? But you just get used to that kind of unorthodox thought being kind of squished by other people. And then you just explore it like even more yourself. And I think that if I could have started that earlier, I would have arrived at some of these things, maybe in a more creative way. But I have a lot of other projects that I worked on in my early 20s that I haven't gotten to christen in the world, and I want to do after the body lever's kind of moving and shaking the world a bit.
Yeah, I imagine somebody like you has enough plans and ideas for the next 20 years, and you're like, I want to do it all right now.
Yesterday. Yeah. Start plans, build blueprints and machines. Let's go.
When I was 15, I wish that I would have spent 30% of my training time in recovery, like active, conscious, deep massage recovery. Because now as an adult, I see that the best muscle growth, the best definition, the best functionality comes from pliable, soft muscles, not from like hard, static tissue. I was all about training hard, and my recovery methods kind of sucked. And even though I spent more time on a foam roller than anyone I know, it wasn't deep enough within the tissues to purely get the release. So as I was training, I was just building muscle on top of tight tissue. And it made me injury prone. It made me way more inflamed. It took way longer to recover from workouts than it should have. And now as an adult, 30% of my training time is active recovery with fascia flow, with tools like yours to keep the circulation and nourishment going as the muscles build. And wow, I just feel like I would have had so few injuries if I would have done that starting young,
I identify with a lot of that really strongly because I think you get bone density growth on top of the musculature kind of reshaping the what is it called? The little sausage casing. I can't remember the myelin sheath of the tissue when you're actually working with it with the tools and the fascia flow. So doing that at a younger age, obviously you're going to have way better hydration and fluid flush all the time. So you're going to be able to recover even faster. But at that time, you're just not feeling it. You're just not feeling sore. You're not feeling like, oh, I need to take an extra day. You stay up for 3 days straight and still run a mile at 6 minutes next to your friends. But that's just because our endocrine and our hormonal, or our endocrine and our human growth hormone systems are really, really pumping a lot of chemicals into us at that time. And then after like 25, 27, they start to decline. And I've started to investigate that stuff myself. And I'm really curious with my tool, the things that may have happened to me as an accident over time. I've been exploring a lot with ChatGPT the last couple of years, and I've come across this concept of what's called bilateral shearing. And I think it's unique to the body lever, where you have two bodies moving, right? And you imagine your bones in the middle of this shearing left to right or up and down. You get the same kind of vector forces as like jumping and catching and all these other things. So I want to get a scan and see if I have like above average bone density, because this could be a huge impact for people with osteo related wasting diseases and things of that nature. So I'm really, really excited to start exploring with this stuff as a result of, the things I've experienced, So I imagine that's the same for you. The things you experience motivate the creative processes you.
Yeah. And I want to tell you that my fascia flow only involves a ball. I'm really passionate about a ball because it simulates the elbow. So in a sense, we're giving the deep tissue massage experience sequentially through the body from the ground up. However, I've noticed with people that have upper leg injuries, so hamstring tears, quad tears, IT band tears, inner thigh issues, the ball is great and it's there it can get anybody into the deep fascia, but anybody that's experiencing scar tissue in these hard to reach areas, your lever has worked better than anything else I have found to create that clamping mechanism between the different layers of the major fascia bands, particularly in the upper leg, because there's so much juice, there's so much tissue. And when you have
it's so intimate. It's so intimate. Like, you don't want to let anybody get up in those regions. Like, even your best massage therapist friend, it's like, well, sure, but I'm going to use a tool for some of this, So you got to investigate for yourself.
Yeah, I feel like your tool definitely has an ability to, I call it the nutcracker. It's funny, but like it clamps in areas that are very hard to reach or hard to stabilize between the fascia layers. So I'm with you. I would love to see if the bone density has changed at all, because I imagine there is some very positive effects that are happening.
It can be as little as 6 months that you can see changes through other practices. So I'm really eager to understand, after 10 years of using this thing, like what my bone density looks like. It's a continuum. I would like to rewind and say, a ball is great. I used to use 4 under my back before I made this thing and wiggle around on them, and one would run away all the time, I think it's a prime tool. This kind of bleeds into a theory I have about tools and which ones we should be using on our bodies. It is a structure that's within our frame, right? Like, we have spherical volumes in our bones on all these places. So it's obvious, it's one of the most fundamental shapes, right? It can go into all these recesses and all these places, but it doesn't have perfect form to go into every place. So you want varied tools. You want different shaped things to get into the little nook in the spine of the scapula here. It's really tough to get into. You'd have to have a really tiny ball and like put your whole body weight on it. Well, just get something to poke in there,
Your tools are better for the fine detail. I kind of see the ball as a major tuner, like a toothbrush, and then there's other little things for flossing.
Right. Well, I like an air ball too. The compression and expansion of one can really make a difference in like the surface area that it touches, whether it's like really peaked or if it softens. And you could sit like a soft air ball right under your diaphragm, which I like to do with this little hunkering stool. I'm going to start doing some content about this stuff soon. Yeah. But it's like a reciprocal thing. You have an air bellow in your chest. Well, push into another air bellow to get the same response and to build the strength of your diaphragm, pushing air bellow against air bellow. And that's kind of like the whole essence of my theory with tools, is like, even ones we're using for fitness, they should also resemble our anatomy. And a dumbbell does not. It's a symmetrical weight. Like, when do you in nature find something you put in your hand that has such a small volume for the grip and has equal weight on both sides? It just doesn't exist. It's like a monopole magnet. This doesn't exist in nature. So I think all those things cause vector problems in our joints. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, it's like when you use these things, there's like a frustrating quality to this. Like they don't really work in the way that we do. So
well, I see you and I on this interesting edge because we're two athletes that have learned a recovery mechanism and believe in a recovery mechanism, yet we're saturated within the fitness industry. So a lot of the people that are sharing the same content as us are either doctors training about like the lymph in the recovery or fitness people who literally look so tight that I'm just like, they need me.
they need something. Something here is going on. Yeah, something in the storm is like thunder and lightning.
So when I sat down with Bill, I had mentioned your tool. And then when you guys linked up, I was just so happy for his calves because it's obvious when you see his structure. It's like, I don't think it's healthy to have the veins pop out. And I know that a lot of people train for that effect. And
Vascular.
yeah, and it actually doesn't look healthy to me anymore. Soft, pliable, big muscles, flexibility within those big muscles to me is a much more beautiful way for us to kind of point the next generation. And I was kind of curious, like with how you and I are presenting ourselves with recovery and the importance of recovery and the symbology that you're bringing into it. What is something that you think has been severely overlooked in our industry?
You said the word, and it was almost triggering for me because it's been getting that way. Flexibility. I think it's just this like amorphous thing that we've been pursuing, and people don't really understand what it is or what it means. And there's like a system of automatic response in our body to whatever environmental situation we're in. And that reflexive nature is what I see flexibility as. And when you look at how the bones interact with one another, they can only do like 6 or 7 specific types of vector things where like one bone is still, one moves, the opposite bone is still and the other one moves, or maybe they move together, or maybe one moves and one moves a little slower than the other. There's all of these intricate ways that the bones articulate around one another. And I think that those patterns get really confusing for our brains, and changing the symbolism that we see these patterns through is a doorway for us to understand our own articulations much better. Because since we're walking on these really stiff surfaces with these really squishy shoes, we're completely disconnected from the ground. You know, I love your grounding practice. I really want to do that more now that I'm here on farmland. It's really great to be able to walk out and do that. But, if you don't have shoes on and you go out on the ground, you're not going to walk heel strike, toe touch, heel strike, toe touch. That would freaking hurt. Like that would hurt. You're going to walk with your toes out and kind of sense the ground first and then kind of lay into your feet. You're not going to run fast because hitting the ground is going to hurt. You're going to trot along at a slower pace, So I think that we've like gotten to be like a dog watching television. Like we think we know what's going on, but really there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes. We don't have an understanding of it unless we really go deep and research everything going on. And even then it's all conjecture. So what I've tried to do as an artist is to take a bunch of these things and converge them. Part of the problem with that is that I've explored the symbolism of the swastika. I call it the swastika for short, the swastika, but also the Hakenkraus. The two different shapes are different, and I want to look at it from a physical embodiment only, because we're not looking at that symbol anymore, and it used to be really prevalent in many, many places, especially in this country and in Germany and other places in the world. We're not looking at that symbol for the triggering reasons. But if we add some extra lines to it and we divorce it from old meanings and we look at it purely as a biomechanical informational tool, it's amazing. I started working with some people just saying, look at this symbol and think about your joints and your head and your tail in this way, and think about how they rotate together, and doing some exercises and understanding that these aren't straight lines. We don't move around like these stiff spine automatons, right? All this stiff spine, stiff deadlifting and squatting kind of mentality, the hard training you were talking about before. I did all that stuff too, but my spine wouldn't allow me to do the heavy lifting. So I never really got into that realm. And I think that the truth of the matter is that things like David Weck's coiling mechanics and functional patterns, rotational pulling mechanics and more natural patterns are how we're supposed to move. And then when we move too far outside of those boxes, we end up with stiff or relaxed injuries. And going back to the beginning, basically I want to try to reframe the word flexibility, and I want to call it lag. I do myself. You like that?
That brings up a lot of different feelings, like the word lag, about being able to, as a gymnast, right? So like I do this shoulder band workout, and every time I do the workout, you're reaching for a flexibility point, and then you're trying to create comfort and stability within that flexibility point, and then kind of come all the way back through to the other side of it. So expansion and contraction, but making that safe and then slowly building it up. So lag reminds me of that like tipping point where I've hit the spot and I'm trying to open to it, but also trying to remain within my breath and keep it comfortable. So I like the word because it reminds me of the feeling that I reach. But please tell me your illustration of it.
It's networking. It's totally a nerdy neckbeard 15-year-old kid playing video games till 4 a.m. word, because when you're playing a game and something happens, but the internet cuts out, you're unable to react. So there's a lag force that disrupts what's going on in the gamification. So if you apply that to your physicality, it's like, oh, I'm trying to stretch into this place. There's a lag force in my body that's keeping me here. Why is that? Oh, it's this homeostatic or storm response, this nervous system response that's trying to keep everything together. And that symbol is literally 4 limbs connected together. So if you just looking at that, like, don't disconnect your limbs from, oh, when we're stretching too far, maybe we're engaging in too much lag force. And on the far end of it, I see lag force also as a form of strength. Because if you apply lag force as a vector quality to your proximal body, for example, so your spine lags as slow and as tight and as stable as it can become, and then you put 1,000 pounds on your back and you try to push with your distal appendages, with your legs and your hands, you're essentially using 2 different systems at the same time. Like, you've lag restricted your spine and then intentfully pulled your limbs through this space to create this massive output. So you're kind of like leveraging these 2 systems against each other instead of using them in unison. I think that's the basis of these kinds of injuries, is that these vector systems have to be in unison. And when we're using intent, drive, and lag forces in different directions, we end up with...
So the golfer in me and the gymnast in me understands what you're saying. And I'm wondering if you could break it down a little bit more for people that may have not just followed what you're talking about.
Sure.
Particularly the lag force, let's say in regards to a handstand, because I know that we both can relate to it very well, and you better than me. So can you kind of break that down for a handstand motion instead of a squat?
Sure. I think the hips are the biggest problem with the handstand in lag, for example. We tend to go to a wall for years and fling one foot to it, right? So you end up in this banana. And then your hips are over here. So your hands are here, your hips are over here, because you walk up to the wall and then you put your hands down and then you try to throw your legs up, but your hips lag, right? They're lagging behind you. So your center of mass is still over here and you're just making this big arch, right? So if you're able to control, so you slow down and you put your hands on the ground and you purposefully lag and prepare your hips to go ahead of you, look at what's already happened. Like, you don't even need to do much. You just tip into the balance of it. I was always trying to work things, build sensations in classes in such a way that people could feel this tipping sensation rather than it's this jump or flight or catch yourself, air brakes in midair. I used to say, activate your air brakes, It's a tipping, it's a deep lag sensation in your spine and then tipping your distal appendages into the air. It's the inverse of a deadlift. Inverse, because you're lagging your spine, doing the same thing, and then using your distal appendages, but you're balancing yourself over the center of mass rather than balancing the weight over yourself, center of mass. So I was talking about this with a little bit with Mark Bell on the podcast. He's like, he and I are such opposites in our capabilities. I want to teach him how to do a headstand because then he'd be Superman, So.
I know what you mean. I see some of these beautiful influencers with great muscle mass, and they don't have really any like function. And I find myself gravitating more towards gymnasts because I'm more inspired by the body weight mastery and by being able to do just like a back walkover and a back handspring. And I get booted up from my coach into these like weightless belts, which is an amazing way to practice because I get to be at like 60% of my body weight. So it removes a line of fear, which is just awesome. But there's still so much to learn about segmenting the body in midair with a rhythm to it. And it makes a standard bicep curl training look so boring.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually something I'm over here, over my shoulder here. I'm actually trying to reinvent, and I really think I'm onto something. I think I may be onto something more impactful than the body lever. Like, I've been using it, and I just, like, I did a lot of that conventional stuff before, and I know all the moves, and it gets boring. Well, this is totally different. You really don't have to use very much weight when you're trying to do rotational things. And thinking about it like this, it's like, do you want to use two muscles, like two biceps, or do you want to use 13 involved in the entire rotational process? Let's make tools that use the whole system, or at least bigger parts of the system, and not segment and slowly destroy those things. Stepping back, there is some value to like the intensity of those lifts, but I think that you can get that sensation through other things. And I've actually been looking at things about edema that's still in the muscle 3 and 4 days later. You can't really fully recover without taking a lot of time between sessions. And the tendency is, people are doing arms and chest and back twice a week and whatnot, end up bloated in the muscle tissue and insensitive to it. That's why people can't move well, because they just literally can't feel what's going on anymore. And they're reliant on this like hydraulic pressure in their body rather than the deeper fascial systems that respond in different timing. I think that that's really the key to really beautiful athleticism is getting the tempos down, getting the 1-to-1 and the 1-to-2 and the 1-to-4 and the 1-to-8 and the 1-to-16 speed in your performance, doing different things, because then the muscle's going to respond with the different types of fiber for all the different situations. So you're going to end up a much more well-rounded athlete. And I'm almost actually to a word you could call, you asked, what kind of athlete are you before the cast? It's really kind of bleeding into combat mechanics and understanding that our fitness is really built around survival, and then secondarily, I think, agriculture.
That's amazing. I think all about like when I'm gardening, how often it becomes like a full body workout, depending on how you approach, your gardening. For me, I'm very in it. So for you to acknowledge, combat and gardening, you're right. I mean, those were the two most functional things. And like carrying water.
Yeah.
That was tools. The original barbell, and weights was 2 buckets of water and a stick.
Unstable as could be, or maybe carrying one on one side and then switching sides. Like, we don't, it's not a symmetrical still weight on both sides is the whole point. I think that, my athleticism has definitely led me to feel like velocity and accuracy is way more important in fitness, because literally survival depends on that. Like, thinking about 15-year-old myself, like maybe I wouldn't even live that long in an old society if I didn't understand how to handle these tools and fight off little animals and fight off other men that are trying to take my stuff. Like, that sort of thing has been the bedrock of our existence for literally thousands of years, and we've forgotten how to handle these tools in like the last 200 since we picked up rifles. Basically, we haven't had to really do this as much. So our fitness has changed. We just like aren't looking at ourselves in the right way anymore. And I think that I've stumbled into it because I've just stared at spinning wood for hundreds, maybe thousands of hours at this point. And it's like, it's taught me other stuff. There's lots of subtle things about how to carve the wood properly and how to get the lines just right, and all the ways that you use the machine to cut it, just the different curves. And I think that kind of unconsciously it's taught me some of these things over time, and then I've applied them to fitness. because I see this like basic thing in our reality happening that should be applied everywhere. Just like the center of a galaxy or the center of the solar system, there's a center of you or a point of you, and you're a moving circle through space. So your body is like this plumbing system, really, that allows you to move your bones in a curvy way to get you to go in a straight line. We just only see the straight line. There's a lot of stuff going on underneath.
Yeah, the plumbing system's a great thing that I always talk about. It's rhythmic waters stuck in these circulation tubes. And to remove the stagnant corners of it, I think requires some sort of self-massage, deep tissue massage, super deep breath awareness. And it's a good focus for you and I, but I think we both can see the deficit in the current fitness instructing, and people
Certainly
are moving towards an edge that's gonna injure them. CrossFit is such an injury-prone industry, and like, I'm grateful that people have community, that they have a competitive edge, that they are pushing their bodies. So it's like, it's not about trashing any sort of fitness regimen. It's understanding that our recovery tools are an essential ingredient. But you and I have moved so far past the normal gym that we both work outside, because why wouldn't you work out outside, sunlight, and then on the earth? You're probably barefoot as much as I am, like when we train.
Try to be.
Yeah, when I'm training, there's no shoes. Like, why would I wear a shoe? It's just going to remove the sensation. And, the omnidirectionalness, the functionality. Anybody that thinks they're strong, I say try to do a press handstand, because the most humbling concept of creating balance and stability. I could lift all the weight in the world, but can I just control my body weight over my head? Damn, that's
even
different.
Totally. Even in a room of elite, like 1%er athletes, you may be in a room of 10 of them, might get one or two that have actually trained that skill and have that, I say, type of body awareness. When I think about the type of body awareness, it actually has to do with these different systems that I've come up with or coined, basically. I was taking a biomechanics class this year, and they were talking about bone vectorization and like how the bones interact with each other. And I was like, do you have a map for this? I said, no. I was like, how the hell do you not have a map for this? Like, it's 6 or 7 different types of how the bones interact with one another. And from that, you can understand so much more than thinking about transverse, totally brain farting the 3, because I don't even think about them anymore. I think in spiral reality. I don't think in the 3 planes, because I think that they all imply that they don't exist.
Well, so the golfer in me has trained for lag between upper body and lower body. And for me, it's an exponential equation. So I know that if I want to hit the ball 300 yards, I have to apply 160 pounds of pressure, which is more than my body weight. So I have to train specifically for leverage down. So if I can apply 160 pounds of leverage onto my front foot, and I can hold my upper body at a 35 degree of rotation, and I can rotate my hips over a stable front foot at a specific speed I don't remember, and I can bring through, my club head speed will be at what I need for a 300-yard shot. And I don't see a lot of other athletes understanding the degree of separation in the momentum and the leverage that your upper body and lower body are capable of creating when you torque it on top of a stable surface.
Right.
And even golfers that, are kicking up their left knee, like they don't really get it. They think it's a hip drive sport and it's a ground driven sport. And there's a huge disconnect still, even in golf itself, from this understanding of where the momentum's coming from.
I would love to try to reframe it that it's a hip balance and a ground drive sport, right? Your hips are in the right place. You can use them, but it's not the driver, right? It's actually the connection to the whole thing, the whole continuum. Because if you have a break in it and you're like, oh, it's my hips moving, well, then your hips are going to move and the ball's not going to move, because you've lost the continuity in your arms because you're focusing on your proximal body. I see baseball swinging very similarly. I've been working with some people on that stuff recently, and it's so similar. And I would wager that a golfer that decided to just go out and swing any freaking thing possible would get really good. Because baseball people, right? Like if your body adapts to like 100 different implements, swinging it in the same way, you have all these little micro sensations that it's like, I can retwist or I can do this or that because I've handled these different types of lever arm relationships, and my body has all these engrams. Well, guess what? Now I can create a really beautiful one for just this single tool. And I think that's kind of the essence of where things are leading to. I think that there's a optimal pathway. I call it the prime pathways in our movement. And those are what's called, this is a big word, a funny word, mechanotransductive positive, meaning the electrical signals input into the muscles are actually creating a positive response to the environment, where you're going to get positive hormones and positive stressors come up from within, and you actually, like, you can get high on mechanotransduct, as in if you move extraordinarily well, not strong, not fast, but well, you get into this entranced state in your movement. You know, look at people that are deep into Tai Chi. I think that that's what they have found. You can get there in other realms or other sports, but you have to understand that curved geometry and that curved movement. Funny word, like I said, but the electrical component of it is most important. And I think that massage and my tools and fascia flow and the ball and all of these things are beautiful and wonderful. However, I think they're only 5% as effective as movement itself. So if we can combine those two things, we can get mechanotransductive movement, and we can get what I call micro spirals of myofascial work moving. We can start that micro practice that grows into a very strong spiral practice.
So are you saying, because you and I are both helping athletes recover, but you're saying if there was a training where we could support the body growing in ways that it would more naturally grow, that it just becomes like how I see it, like brushing our teeth. It's just a maintenance thing that you do. Okay.
Sort of. That there's, like, if you look at, say, functional patterns, they're highly controversial because they're so ardent about their message. I agree with some of it, not all of it, obviously, but the very like physical capacity of mechanotransductivity, meaning when you're moving with your joints in the way that they're designed, you're going to have positive hormone responses. But if you move in a way they're not designed to, meaning too much lag force, too much stretching, pulling the joints apart, what happens? Cortisol, right? And then you have these cascading effects of painkillers. And I've gotten really flexible over the years. I can put both feet behind my head and bind my hands around my back. But that's not healthy for my spine. There are places in my body that I'm borrowing from that are unconscious. And I think that using tools that we would find in nature that resemble our anatomy are going to give us those good patterns. But the kettlebell and the dumbbell and the barbell, these symmetrically designed kind of thought fitness tools, not natural fitness tools, what I call prime tools and synthetic tools, they're going to give us bad feedback on some level or another. The only thing is it's hard to use natural tools because it's just like a stick and you swing it around. You're like, what do I do with this thing? Well, you fight your friend with it, actually. Like, that's actually what we've done. So go practice that and you'll actually feel really good. It's just a hard pill to swallow because it's so combative.
And it's childish. I mean, it's to return play back to the discipline of exercise. I mean, I think that we're a little off the track. Like, I don't think 50 years from now, people are going to be working out in fluorescent lit gyms on little robots. I think we are going to return back to the park, return back to the playgrounds, and we are going to have a relationship with what the body is asking and feeling. I feel like the gym is a very handheld experience for people who don't want coaches and who don't really know how to feel the body. So you just get on this machine and you do what the machine card says to do.
I love that word handheld that you just used to apply to that, because it really is like everything's outside. Everything's outside. Like you're holding a weight, or you're on a machine, or you're using a cable, or you're watching someone else's video. You're not taking a single implement and sitting there with it and concentrating and getting better with it because you're doing the same kind of thing and learning how to rotate better every time. Oh, wait, 1,000 times in, I'm pretty good at this. Now I'm going to try something else. Oh, wow, now that shoulder problem I had is gone because I'm not just sitting there cranking on the same single spot. There's 600 muscles in this body. I don't need to just listen to one friend. He's kind of an asshole. It's like you really have to dial back and use the whole system in order to be a human being, right? A human being is the summation of all of these things. So if we're just getting big muscles, we're not going to be able to react to our environment or survive for that matter.
But they figured it out. I feel like the fitness industry right now is sitting on the throne of they know how to create sculptures, and the plastic surgeons are sitting on the same vat of knowledge right now. Like, we can turn you into Kim Kardashian. And as an outsider, I feel like you and I are two wizards that get to exchange information. We get to say, okay, if we have our say here, let's just pretend somebody gave us $1 bajillion. There's absolutely no limit. We have everything we need in the world. What would be the facility or the playground or there's no construct. If somebody gave you $1 bajillion to resurrect something that the future generations of athletes could use or utilize or go and experience themselves, what would that look like?
You ever seen the show Spartacus?
Is it not the show?
It's about slaves in ancient Greece. I was just going to say Eludus, a training facility that was a training facility for slaves, that were put into combat in the Colosseum. But that show really showed this culture around it that could be cultivated into something really beautiful. I also really like the factual stuff about the Spartans because they've been romanticized as these totally superficial things in Hollywood. And you look at their culture, they were totally different. All of the Greek royalty wanted their children to be educated by the Spartans because they studied math and linguistics and rhetoric and dance and they combed their hair and wrestled and danced before battles, as an intimidation factor. They had a totally different perspective on all of this stuff because they understood it on a level that others just didn't. So I tend to think of my path as something like that, just trying to embody working with people like yourself. And I'm only very recently being able to do so because of how much this has grown and kind of getting over the shyness of being in front of a crowd and whatnot. But that's all a process, of course. And I get to play midwife with the tool I've created, and it's my responsibility now to bring it into the world so that it can share its gifts with everyone. But I wanted to dial back and say, I think that you mentioned the word a couple of times, community. And I think that is the majority of what people are actually trying to engage in fitness, because what else do we have to do after work? We have sports, we have our own endeavors, if we have, ambitious things like you and myself want to do. But a lot of people are just trying not to be alone. And for me, that was a lot of it going to all these yoga classes over the years was I didn't really have a pathway for myself forward until I had this tool in my hands. And I thought, okay, well, now I need to put it into everybody's hands. So it took me more into the community for the longest time. But I see the disconnect, in the normal fitness environment, there is that handheld factor where people are on their phones in between their sets on their bench press machine. It's we'll go to a class now. And then you have foibles in classes because individual needs are kind of left behind. So, maybe you end up injured in a class and then you're rehabbing on your own. It's all of these things. It's this big continuum now. And I think you're right that the industry or the human consciousness, in this area that we live in is breaching new space because we've seen that the old systems don't work as well as we've always thought. So I'm trying to be on the edge like yourself and come up with informational tools that'll help make that transition a little easier for us all.
Yeah. And for the younger version of ourselves, that's often who I think I'm working for. I think I'm working for the girl who's 15 right now, who sees herself as a pro and is about to commit to 10 years of heavy duty training, both mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, and learning to draw the best out of yourself. It's so much more than just body when you're a pressure player. And I love the breeding of bringing the breath in a very deep awareness inside of exercise, and then pulling in that balance and that toe dexterity and the inversions. I think that being a well-rounded athlete with body mastery control, and the ability to throw a punch. You know, I'm a musician, so I never took the karate classes, but I always felt like a bamboo stick would be my weapon of choice. And just getting familiar with my bamboo stick on my patio makes me feel a certain way. It's something to hit something with that, and then to experience like, okay, well, can I hit it harder? It's kind of a really interesting rush. And we don't get that at the gym either. Like, unless you're punching the bag, you're not.
Right. You get no impact anywhere. You're just kind of slowly kind of maneuvering stuff around. It's kind of a slow dance. And then, you know, like you might as well just go dance, right? No, hitting something is a lot more fun, and having something you slam on the ground or toss in the air and then catch, that's even similar. You know, catching would be the opposite of that. That's one of the vector forms that I talk about. You know, you have your impact force, and then you have your retraction or your reacting force, the lag force.
Yeah.
There's so much that could be played with, you know. The sky is the limit. It's just about like how you want to chart your capabilities on the map of like what's possible as a human, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned it before, and you have characters like Mark Bell that are like, oh, I'm going to be carnivore. And then like this week, he was like, I'm going to just eat sugar. He just like completely changes what he's doing so that he can witness this like massive vacillation in his body and go, now get it. Now I get it here. And then I can share about it rather than just parroting and repeating what other people have told me in the past. So I've always had a problem with that, parroting. Go ahead.
You do? Oh, the parroting versus the experience versus the full-on experiment within them. Have you gone a specific period of time without using your tool to just see how fast or how fastly tense your body becomes?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, I go through regular bouts of not using it. You know, it's that same young person feeling, like when you're not feeling it, you don't really reach for the recovery tools, you know? So I tend to think that like a lot of this type of content and this type of work in the fitness industry feels like you're talking to your dentist, right? Like, and the dentist is like, okay, now go home and you're going to work on your neck 3 times a week. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I just want to go to the gym and have a good time and get a good pump on, which doesn't even work. You know, the pump actually is a detriment, but people don't really understand that. It just feels invigorating. So you want to skip over the boring stuff until your body is like, just slow down, because this hurts too much, you know? And I think that the conduit of pain, it actually literally changes our brain structure over time. I know that chronic pain changes how I react to the day. If I wake up and I like slept with the pillow under the wrong part of my ribs, I'm like, I'm gonna be on the body lever for a good half an hour in the morning, or just moving, doing something to get that up to par, and then working, you know, doing the rest of my training stuff.
So personally, I did a recent experiment. I've done it twice now where I stopped training completely and my fascia flow. So I just stopped my recovery process and I only trained the way that I used to in college. Like just I do my gym workouts and then I do my little in-betweens, but then I just stopped doing fascia flow. And it took me about 3 weeks to have my knee pain return.
It sounds about right. Yeah, it sounds about right. 2 weeks.
When I did it everything cleared up faster than normal. So I tell people all the time, when you first start recovering, it's 6 months that you got to kind of bite off, you know, you got to commit because we have to undo and unravel the damage. But then you can kind of oscillate and get back in it. So after a week of training, I kind of almost felt like I was back to par. So I was curious, like when you step away from it, have you noticed like a specific period of time before like the aches and pains start to come back?
I mean, depending on what I'm doing, it might just be a day or two. You know, sometimes I feel like I have to have infinite work output as an entrepreneur. You're just like, I'm up today. What's going on? You know, and I have like 400 orders coming in the next month that I have to like distribute and send out. It's a good problem, but it's just like all at once. It's easier if you consistently are able to respond to things. But yeah, like when it comes to training regularity, the process of this business has slowed down my morning habit. I used to go to a class. I call it a class. It would usually be a yoga class, but I don't do what the teacher asks me to do. I am that guy in the corner. Stop doing the yoga Olympics today, just one day. No, I was always just kind of on my own path. I would follow along with what people would be doing and be doing my own thing, jumping off to other branches on the tree, coming back. But now I don't go to classes at all. So, I think that it's changed with my life situation. I spend almost all of my training time now on pain management, recovery, and endurance, so that I can keep working on what I'm working on right now. And my fitness goals, so to speak, have taken a back seat for a while, just because I've been moving my shop and rebuilding all of this stuff so that I can actually tackle what's coming, I think. But I'm really, really excited because in the time of my injury and in the time of kind of recalibrating all of these things, I've taken so many lessons from the periphery, with, like I said before, David Weck. I've been down to San Diego a bunch of times and been learning stuff with other people in the industry. And I'm really trying to pull it all together and offer my own education around this tool and around the other asymmetrical tools that I'm developing and some of the other, deeper ideas. So super pumped.
Excited, man. I feel not alone because
Good.
of you. I feel very much like there's not a lot of athletes yet talking about fascia recovery. And in the last year, I've been learning how to tumble. I've wanted to be a gymnast my whole life. And, 34 sounds like a great time to try. But I found a great coach that I trust. And through the learning of building momentum, like in a back handspring or in a round off, there's a lot of trust that you have to have. You have to, have good functional lines that you can maintain vertically and then in midair. And teaching my brain how to go from, let's just say like in a tumbling sequence, it's a simple one, like cartwheel, round off, back handspring, back tuck. You throw the back handspring, the leverage point is very different than a back tuck. And how you have to drop your hands during the land will set you up for the next throw. And I'm no master at it. I am a beginner and I have a little bit too much power, which is fun because I feel like I know how to push on my toes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been humbling to get back into a form of fitness that is just kicking my ass, like the press handstand. I'm 9 months into learning a press. And, if I do 10 of them, I do one good one. And I'm so proud of that.
Right. And the first one always happens like by accident. You're like, what? I did. It was a tip. I fell into that. Right. Yeah. And you're always like, did you see that? Did I get it on camera? I know that discovery. The first time it happened for me, I was like trying something random against near a wall. So I had the courage and I was like, oh, my hips, my legs just went whoop. And I was like, what happened? I didn't understand it at all, but it was because my hips got so far behind me that they just went up on their own. And it's like those building sensation moments that's everything I try to build my classes around. And I love that sort of stuff. So if you want to work on that sometime, we should definitely pair up and like I could give you my knowledge, it'd be a lot of fun.
I would love to. And I think what I want to do is just encourage athletes that have gotten bored, that have been in the gym for a decade or more. Like, okay, they might have tried yoga and not vibed with it. And like, I love yoga, but really I love yin yoga and I love doing it at home before bed. I'm not a big about doing yoga in the crowd. I kind of want it to be me and internal.
Yeah.
But gymnastics has brought me the sense of camaraderie that CrossFit has, because you root for each other, you learn from each other's like segments of the body. You learn, okay, well, coach did it this way, you're doing it this way, this is what looks off. And there's that sense of exploration together. So it's fun for you thinking of it like those Spartans, because there's a camaraderie in that.
Right.
A lot of people miss it, the team aspect of working out that I think is really gained,
Well, there's definitely evidence to the social proof when you're learning something. In my flight club classes, which is like arm balances and handstand class I used to teach. Sometimes at the end of class, I would take 10 minutes and say, okay, everyone just circle up, and someone volunteer to show us something. So I would allow someone to volunteer and show us a technique on the wall, and the whole class would watch them. And they say, oh, what happened? Oh, your hips were here and your hands were like this. Try this and try that. So everybody got a chance to teach, and that person got a chance to go, okay, I'm going to try this differently. Every single time, the second time, they did the technique better, because there was this like conscious vulnerability, conscious play, exploration, and then the great job. Just people just would emerge like smiling and happy because they got to have other people witnessing them doing the thing that they're there to do. So I think that there's this part of yoga and classes where everybody's on their lily pad. I call it the lily pad, your mat. And you just roll them up and you put it over your shoulder and you go home after class. There isn't this like cohesion. So I really like running into practitioners, and I liked teaching classes where you would get people teaching each other and talking to one another and like having fun and stuff. And then it's not even, is it yoga anymore, or is it community? So to the people watching, like if you can find a place like that where you can just expand what you're doing a little bit, you're going to be blown away with how much your body changes and how much your mind might change too, in reflection of being challenged by the presence of other people seeing what you're doing. And it's like dance in a way. You're expressing yourself and finding this like awkward thing you're doing, but at the end of it, you actually feel liberated and better because you're in a state of authenticity.
I got to tell you, Steve, I have a deep respect for your ability to continue to learn. I can't believe how many coaches I've been around and teachers that have learned one thing and then they just deliberately teach that sequence the same way for 15 years.
Parrot, right? Same thing over and over. Yoga classes are like that. I had people come in and be like, I've been doing yoga for 20 years. I've never heard any of this shit. Right? What are you doing? It's great. And having people come to a class, to a flight club, try it the first time and surpass themselves was just the ultimate reward for me, because you would see somebody who's shy to try a headstand or shy to do an arm balance or something, and they're there anyways. They're there to try it. They're there because they're curious. And you're like, come on, just like build a sensation, try this sensation. We're gonna do this little challenging thing, and then, I just popped you out of the little bird's nest, and then you fell right into the arm balance. I literally had like situations where I would trick people and have their body really, really close to it, and then I'd be like, now extend your leg and put your knee on your arm. And they're like, what? I didn't know you could get here like this, And it's just so much fun seeing that. So like I was saying before, people watching, find something that's interesting to you, and then the rest is a byproduct now. And think about it in spiral.
There is such a skill in inspiring and educating people, and to do it creatively and to keep it playful and then to keep people motivated to come back is such a knack. And I'm just wondering, as a coach, like coach to coach, what's been the most lovely experience you've had in training in the last like couple years that come to mind?
Honestly, I think it's very recent. I think it's, thinking about building sensations and having people go, aha, holy cow, I didn't know that this was going on. When I was at the super training gym with Mark Bell and Nsima one day, we're just chatting about the symbolism and how the hands and feet are tied together neurologically. And we're just sitting there and they're talking about like wrist exercises and stuff. And I was like, yeah, if you point your thumb one way and then you try to point your big toe in the same exact manner, like you make the same exact action with your big toe as your thumb on the same side, like you can feel those actions add to one another. And they both kind of looked at me and I'm like, whoa, that was an interesting feeling, because we were talking about how everything's supposed to rotate with each other.
I'm doing it right now.
When you, right, I know you do it slowly, or in your
firework thing is
in your shoes too. I don't know why it's happening. I don't know why it's happening right now because of the double thumb up. It's just, it's like, okay, we're playing fireworks. It's a system of that symbol. That symbol is telling us that all of our appendages are connected together, and you can feel that in the talus of the talus bone that doesn't have, I believe it doesn't have myofascial connections. It's just sitting there. It's like a gyroscope in the feet. And I think that we have We probably have a gyroscope in the hands, and then we have the hyoid bone, which is the same thing here. So you actually have a gyroscope in your neck, in your hands, and in your feet. So I think that those systems are somehow interconnected. I'm just exploring this stuff right now. But when you feel that stuff rotate together, like it's obvious, like when I walk, when I throw something, these things move together. So just exploring in that way is everything I'm doing right.
I just want to share this with you. I am starting a little side project with a group of women to teach them how to sing. And I've trained people one-on-one, but I haven't trained a group. But I've always dreamed about having a bit of a choir of my own. And I just watched a dissection by Gil Hadley on the trachea and where the hyoid bone is, and how the thyroid kind of sits right over the vocal cords, and how much the vocal cords can affect the thyroid bone. And how the trachea is full of these tiny little circles that are made of cartilage that allow it to ebb and flow with all of our body positions, and how it's a resonant chamber. And so when we move air through it, it actually vibrates the soft and hard palate in order to create like resonant tone. And as much as I can visualize it, to apply it to people and to make it like a functional thing, because I don't want to teach voice the same way that I was taught. I want to teach it in a much more primal way, where it's less control of the sound and it's more an internal capacity to feel the breath and then feel the resonant chambers open, and then learn how to play with moving the resonance around. But I'm excited.
That's really cool, and building sensations for people in those kinds of environments is a really fun thing to explore. Like, I want to tap people into this type of singing. Well, how do I get them to feel this thing first, so that I'm not just talking about that, right? And it's a really interesting pathway, and it's hard to get it exactly right. That's why the play is necessary.
People are shy. So I'm finding that, like, if I lay them on their back, I can get them to breathe into the back muscles a little clearer. And then I can put weights on their belly so that they're a little more in the breath. And then with their eyes closed, we sing towards the ceiling. And so there's a couple tricks to get people kind of out of the mind to like make sounds in front of others. But anyway, it's such a fun exploration.
I have maybe an esoteric exercise I've done and noticed. I have never really put labels to it, but it seems pertinent in this context. The ribs are good at side bending, right? They're like accordions and twisting both. And I've had sensations of when I have an undulation going in my spine, left to right, I feel this like pumping of the lungs. And there are times that I've been moving side to side where my breath is able to move through this undulation and not from me breathing. So it's like a third way to breathe, right? So you can like control your diaphragm, you can have unconscious breath, and then you can use your spine. So like this like back and forth and just allowing the control of my breath to fade. And then this pumping in, pumping out, pumping in, pumping out, pumping in, pumping out happens. And it almost feels like a didgeridoo, like you're continuous with this process. It's like a reverse didgeridoo, in fact, because you're using the internal pressure and that's coming in and out versus pushing out and that coming in and out. This might lend a sensation of, oh, this system can function or can work with atmospheric pressure without me controlling it. Like there are elements of this. If I'm moving or holding my body, if I feel a certain way, the air is going to flow in a more natural or a more constricted manner. All of these, I imagine you have lots of diaphragmatic exercises you're working with people. I tend to see that in a lot of yoga classes, they think of it in this direction, like breathing in, breathing out. But if you start to look at this direction, like when you're walking, your gait mechanics engage your breath work too. So just a thought, I never, like I said, never put a label to that exercise, and maybe I should, because it could be a breath technique like anything else.
The mighty breath,
like so many other things,
is a shape. It's a Fibonacci shape, and it has to do with inhaling through the nose, and then we fill up the basin of the lungs first, because that's where the most tissue is. So we push the belly out, and then we inhale more, we fill the back, then the sides, then the front. So we're learning to separate the intercostals. There's 3 layers of the intercostals. So using the arms is a great way to get people to open and get out. And then I build their awareness around where the tension has built up in the body. And we use the lungs to push against the inside, from the inside of the body into the intercostals to open up where it's stuck. Then when we exhale, it's all nose for me. We push the chest down, keeping the belly out, then the sides, then the back, and then at the very end, the belly. So the ribs are played like an inner accordion. Yeah, right. The accordion, depending on the style of singing. It's interesting because I've trained with so many different vocal coaches. Their approach to the breath is slightly different.
It's like swinging with different bats, right? You got to try all these different methodologies and you get it right.
Yeah, to fuse it, it really depends on how you're singing. Like rap and metal people are going to breathe differently than an opera person who needs full resonation, full depth. And it's beautiful to like learn both techniques and then to identify with people the peculiar ways that they can harness the valve pressure, because that's what singing is, valve pressure. It's learning how to control the airflow and the vibration and the resonance to the degree that, to the volume that you want it to be.
I was thinking of, I like, you said you're nose focused in that, and I think that's ideal. You don't want to be mouth breathing. There's so much evidence of like the mouth breathing causing all of these cleft, all these issues. I would be curious to think or to wonder if you might be able to apply that curvature on an angle to just slightly change and then try it left and try it right. And to me, the reason for that would actually be that the muscles go in this direction, right? They actually travel in that direction. And I was talking with a friend yesterday who was like a yogi and wants to explore this sort of stuff. And I said, with those muscles, that we were talking about, the rib muscles specifically, they will activate through reflex if they're doing what they're designed to do, So if you are kind of leaning and then you're doing your mighty breath work, maybe that Fibonacci spiral will find a little bit more of those corners that you were talking about earlier, just through those tiny undulations. Just those little things can cause such massive sensation changes. So I'd love to hear if you try that, if that works.
I teach it when we do a maximum capacity.
Great.
It's like, but I try not to cue them to do it. I try to teach them physiology up front. And then when we come in here, I say, lean into the tension and make it weird if you need to. And so I demonstrate like a banana hold off to the either side, but I want them to feel where their tension is stuck. Because if they're stuck on the bottom left diaphragm, they might need to kind of twist and open, but if they're stuck on the front intercostals, this might be all they need. Does that make sense?
Right. It's highly variable, and I agree with that a lot because the mind has to discover for itself. You can't always just be like Q, found it. It doesn't work that way. It's like Q, and then you take 10 years and you explore up and down over here. Oh, now I got it. Okay, great. Now I'm not kicking up against the wall anymore,
I still am.
Sort of things.
I'm still using the wall a little bit. I'm getting there, though. I'm on a crash pad now.
Yeah. Turn around, face in toward the wall, hands up, and try to keep your feet from falling over. It's terrifying at first, but anyway, play with the handstand stuff some other time.
We covered a lot of beautiful stuff here. We covered how you deal with pain, your worst injury, your recovery methods, your tips for ourselves when we were 15. Is there anything that we didn't touch upon that you'd like to endeavor into?
What it takes to start something new, belief in yourself, like even when you don't, just knowing that you need to get up and move the needle forward is the force that could take any silly endeavor of tying 2 sticks together that you bought at Home Depot to squeeze your leg with into something that may help everybody. So if you're trying to start something and you don't really know what it is, and people around you are say, oh, nay, know that people less qualified, less intelligent, and less articulate than yourself made it because they just believed in themselves anyways. So, just keep going. I've been trying to really impart that part of this because this has been a lot of hard work for me, but I'm still here and I know that everybody's capable of this kind of thing. So if you have something to contribute, throw down. It's time. We all need it. We all need to be part of this integration or convergence, for all of our history. Just keep going.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I know the last year you and I have been in such a push, and it's been nice to know that you're in the same push as me. I think that we are midwives to something much greater than us. And my daily concern is not even of our generation, it's for the next one. And how can we make them better and make them not trip over the stones that we've tripped over? And it takes a lot of gusto and a lot of gamble to do what you and I are doing, and to believe in ourselves is and then to have each other. Really feel like teaming up with fellow wizards and fellow people that see the vision is kind of essential. Linking in arms makes it easier on harder days to see the vision and hold the vision.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for doing the work that it takes to leave something worthwhile behind. That's what I'm doing too. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.